Cheers. Thanks very much. Just wait for my, there we go. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the opportunity to speak. The marine chapter was coordinated by myself, but as with many of the other SOE chapters, it draws from people across multiple agencies and government departments. I'd like to thank Evan McGovern in particular from the Marine Institute, who was co-author on this, but the Marine Institute provided a huge amount of the information for this, and I thank them very much for that. Also the Department of Housing, particularly the Marine Environment section, but also planning and other sections. And again, lots of colleagues in the EPA and contributions from Parks and Wildlife as well. So thanks to everyone for their assistance on this. I just wanted to say that the SOE team have done a great job on all their lovely pictures. It looks fantastic. And that lovely picture of the Moy there reminds me of my last trip to the Moy, which was like that, which I think is a much more accurate description of what it's like. The Marine chapter covers Ireland's marine area, which is huge. This is the real map of Ireland, which was published by the Marine Institute a good few years ago now. But it shows that the area of our marine is more than 880,000 kilometres, so 10 times the land mass of Ireland. And it's broken up into many different management units, assessment areas. For example, the Water Framework Directive area covers the coastal fringe. It's all of our estuaries, and it goes out to roughly a nautical mile away from the coast. However, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which is the other EU directive that governs our environmental status beyond the WFD, covers a massive area outside of that. There's further divisions depending on which organisation you're working with. So the OSPAR Commission covers the Northeast Atlantic from up in the Arctic all the way down to the Azores. Unfortunately, I haven't gone to the Azores for meetings just yet, but we'll see. And then within that, there's further subdivisions. So this is an example of the eutrophication assessment done by OSPAR, published in their QSR 2023, which is another big assessment of ocean health across the Northeast Atlantic. And you can see it's broken down into further assessment areas. The general high-level overview is that our offshore waters are generally fairly clean and healthy. Our nearshore coastal systems are under increasing pressures, and the talks we've had throughout the day have highlighted that, particularly the last ones by Hugh and Wayne have shown that the estuarine areas are the worst performing areas. Another key thing to consider in this large assessment area is who's in charge. This is a quick graph of about 40 different government departments, agencies, who all have roles in the marine area. And it's not always clear who to ask if there's a problem or who to go to. There was a question earlier about aquaculture. Aquaculture cuts across many of these circles. So there can often be a lack of clarity on where to go to address situations within this large marine area. As Wayne mentioned earlier, only 36% of our estuarine water bodies are at good or high status. The picture for our coastal waters is better. 81% of those are currently at higher good status, so they're actually the best performing water category. And you can see how it's distributed around the country there. We assess this water quality status using a wide variety of different elements. We've a large biological monitoring program within that coastal and transitional area where we look at a lot of different biological communities. And it's important to look at this range of biological communities because each one gives you a different picture of what the pressures are. So for example, the opportunistic macroalgae in the transitional. This is the far corner there. It's piles of rotting green seaweed on the beach when the tide goes out. So it's a key indicator of issues. The phytoplankton is another big program which is undertaken by ourselves in the EPA and also the Marine Institute. But that gives us an indication of wider issues, such as how the food webs, the wider food webs within the marine environment are being affected by a variety of pressures. As you can see, again, this assessment is coordinated by the EPA, but works with actors across multiple different agencies. One of the more disappointing elements of this is the south coast. From Skibbereen at the bottom to Wexford on the right, there's no good status estuaries. Everything along there is moderate or worse. So it's a stark reflection of what's going on the land and how that's interacting with the marine environment. The coastal areas are a slightly happier picture. There's a lot of blue and green. But of concern is that you get areas such as Wexford, Waterford, Youghal, Cork, where those coastal water bodies are also showing ecological effects and showing moderate status. So that estuarine issue is starting to be seen in that coastal area, which has traditionally been considered our star player. The Department of Housing Marine Environment section have just finished the public consultation on the latest MSFD assessment. So the Marine Strategy Framework Directive has a slightly broader remit than the Water Framework Directive. It's not just looking at ecological quality, it looks at a much wider variety of descriptors. So it looks at biological diversity, commercial fish and shellfish, seafloor integrity, hydrographical condition, which ties in with the hydromorphology I mentioned earlier, and also contaminants and other things. So it's a much wider assessment of what's going on in the environment. The latest assessment is a huge piece of work, and it represents a great body of work that's been done across multiple different agencies. But there's still a lot of unknowns within that. You can see this is the report from the department's MSFD report. And there's a lot of good news in there. There's a lot of green showing that individual elements are reaching good ecological state, a good environmental status. As it says there, there's over 20 different monitoring programs, there's 22 scientific assessments, but there's still gaps within this. So the grey areas are areas where we don't know what's happening, and the oranges are where it's clear that there are issues. And D1 biodiversity, you can see that everything within that quadrant is showing signs that we're not at good environmental status. So biodiversity is a challenge within our marine environment. But there has been good progress made in reducing pollution across other descriptors. So not all bad news for a change. The report goes through a variety of different pressures acting on a marine environment. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just a few key ones would be marine fisheries. Marine fisheries is still it's a very important economic driver for Ireland. There's many communities around the country who depend on the fisheries sector. But it continues to be a big threat on the ecosystem. And unfortunately, there's fewer marine stocks that are achieving good ecological status now than they were in the previous report. Marine litter is showing signs of improvement. There has been a downward trend in the marine litter assessments, but there's still issues, and we still see a lot of beach litter with plastics being found on most of our beaches. Although initial reports from the later Coast Watch surveys have indicated some reduction in plastic bottles. So it just shows that when targeted measures are agreed and implemented that there can be a positive effect. Climate change is a big problem across the marine area. We've seen global sea surface temperatures increasing. We're seeing increase in marine heat waves. These are becoming more intense and more frequent. And ocean acidification, where the waters become more acidic, is a growing concern. The Marine Institute published the Ocean Climate and Ecosystem Report last year, which goes into great detail. And you can see that the global trends, which are the blue line, the trends within Ireland mirror those trends. And this graph here shows the daily sea surface temperatures across the North Atlantic. 2023 was a record year. It surprised everyone with quite how extreme it was. And 2024, although better, is still way above the historical record. Ireland is committed to protecting 30% of our marine area by 2030. We've made strides towards that. We are up to 9% of protected areas. It's still well short. I was delighted to be at the launch of the MPA Life project last week, which is a 9-year, 25 million project to set up marine protected areas. But unfortunately, the legislation underpinning the marine protected areas is still not in place. Offshore energy is going to be a big issue within the marine environment. We've committed to achieving 5 gigawatts of installed offshore wind. It's essential for us to meet our energy demands, but it's going to have serious impacts within the wider marine environment, and also how that affects local communities, people with economic interests within these areas. The responses to these myriad problems include the Marine Strategy Framework Directive Programs of Measures. It has laid out a series of plans and measures that need to be implemented. These include the MPAs. It includes developing nature-based solutions to protect biodiversity in coastal marine systems, and developing an all-island strategy for non-indigenous species. The MBTC have just got a new marine and coastal unit set up to look at invasive species in the marine at a all-island scale. The WFD Water Action Plan has also been mentioned a couple of times today, and again, it's measures within that are going to impact on our estuaries, which is vitally important so that those impacts don't spread into our wider coastal environment. There's also has been recently a change in our marine area planning. The MARA was established in 2023, and this sets out a new way for managing our marine environment and planning what's going to happen within that space. Again, it's a complicated area, and you can see, again, there's a large number of actors involved in this new Marine Planning Act. The key messages that we've pulled out, although I mean, it's been mentioned before, it's hard to pick out your top messages. It highlights that we're generally clean and healthy, but there's a lot of work to do. Also, that biodiversity and on marine ecosystems is a problem, and that there's a lot of policy and a lot of actors within the area, and we need better coherence and coordination between them. And then just to finish, a few other key points is that challenges persist for marine biodiversity. Nature-based solutions have been identified as important, so it's important that these actually get followed through and implemented effectively. And my clock has gone red, so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.